So today, really, I'm just trying to give you some information about how you can grow your lawn, which sounds really simple. We're not trying to eliminate chemicals, really. I mean, it would be nice if we could, but lawn is really, I'll just come out right out and straight say it right now. Number one, lawn is a crop. We consider it a crop in the agricultural business. So it's a cover crop, technically. And the real purpose of lawn is to prevent erosion. But all the rest of us see lawn as this beautiful green thing with stripes on it when it's done right, and it's like art, right? So because of that, I guess it's probably now 80 years of this 2-acre, 2.5 kids subdivision type environment. We've turned lawn into this monoculture thing, and nowadays the best lawns are usually pumped with, you know, liquid fertilizers and liquid everything and sprayed with stuff, and that does work. Some of the best lawns you see will be like that, and they are fantastic, and you can see them in Glastonbury, you can see them all around Connecticut, more so than Western New York. But so what today is about is how can you sort of, I'm not going to guarantee you're going to get that by doing this, but it'll still look really good. And there's an old saying about the tailor or the shoemaker who, you know, makes awesome shoes, but, you know, he wears the worst shoes. If you go by my house, I mow it at the tallest setting because my lawn is not phenomenal. I am that person, and it's hard because I look at it and I go, I'm going to do this. I've designed it 6 times. I know exactly what I want to do to it. Oh, next year I'll do it. Yeah, I called EA Quinn this morning, and I'm like, guys, I'm doing a presentation tonight, and my lawn looks like hell. So I'm not perfect. You know, landscape architects aren't perfect. Lawn people aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect, but we try to do our best. So there are ways to minimize the amount of fertilizer that you use. There's ways to reduce the amount of insecticides that you use. It used to be called integrated pest management, which is what it's probably still called, and I was almost certified to do that. But essentially what it does is you're doing a lot more monitoring of your ground than basically dumping stuff on it, you know. So we're going to try to get through that today, and I get very tangential when I talk. I do sound like Alvin from the Chipmunks because I have bad allergies, which was also very detrimental to me in landscaping, but what are you going to do? So I have provided, I don't know how many, if there was enough of these, but I'm sure I can get more if we need them. But there's some hit topics on this, and this is more for take home than it is really for today's discussion, but the big topics I'm going to get through today, hopefully, are the dirt, which we refer to as soil. Don't cringe, Bob. It's okay. Why it matters. I'm going to talk about the sun and the shade. Seems very basic. The grass itself. I'm going to talk about getting grass started and then how to keep it going. And then mowing, which is one of my favorite things to do. And then chemicals, which sounds really bad, but it's not so bad. So the dirt, I'm going to try to refer to it as soil from now on. Soil structure is, there's a lot of science about soil, and I'm not going to bore you with the science of soil, but essentially it's not this real simple thing that looks like this. And there's actually 2 different, I'll send this around, but there's actually 2 different sections, and this is directly from my yard, so this is going to be fun. So the soil has a structure to it, and that structure determines how well it holds nutrients, like how well your body holds nutrients. It's not so dissimilar. It determines how much water passes through it, you know, like we do. And one of the primary things about soil is its compaction, which is really how hard it is when you walk on it. I always tell people, and science or not related, if the soil is like concrete and you can drive on it and you don't leave ruts with your mower, and if you can drive on it with your car and you don't leave ruts on it, then you're probably not going to have good grass unless it's complete sand. Like everything else, there's a bunch of asterisks that go with this, but generally speaking, if your ground is hard as a rock, you're not going to have a lot of luck with much of anything, let alone grass. So I like to say if it's so hard you can play bocce ball on it, Then it won't absorb water. If it's really light in color and it's not dark in color, just generally speaking, it's probably sort of on the side of dead soil. If you need True Green come along, not to throw True Green under the bus, but if you need them or somebody like them out there every month with a hose and some kind of a spreader, you probably have hard ground and it's not taking, the top quarter inch is taking nutrients. If it doesn't smell like manure ever, if there's no worms in it, if you're killing all the mosquitoes off and there's no bugs whatsoever or insects, you're kind of like defeating the purpose of this whole conversation. So yes, unfortunately, if you want good grass, you're going to have bugs. And the really good stuff has a lot of worms in it. So there's a lot of ways you can fix bad soil. Well, let me back up. You can't really fix bad soil, at least not in the short term. And what tends to happen is when you really have bad soil, it gets taken out and new soil gets put in. But we're also not going to do that today. Instead, over time, if you're patient enough, which none of us are, but you're here because you want to hear about this, so you're going to put down a 1/2 inch of compost basically every year. And after 5 to 10 years, you're going to go from junk soil to really, really good soil, believe it or not, because that organic stuff gets worked into the ground by the insects and everything else and water. It will eventually work its way in there if you combine it with punching holes in the ground, which is called core aeration. And if you mow your grass tall, which most people don't like to do that either. So there's a few things you can do that you can fix your soil or amend it. I call it amending. And most of today is going to be introducing you to using organics. There's a company called We Care out of Ellington, and they can provide you with this compost. You can get it from a lot of other places. You can get it in bags too. But essentially, you're trying to add organic content to your lawn. So before I get into the sun and the shade and the grass itself, what does organics do? People say that there's never really this magic wand for stuff, but organics really is sort of a magic wand for almost anything you try to grow. What it does is it works for both really sandy soil, which is stuff that you can dump water on and it just goes straight through it. And it works really good for soil that's really tight. And that's the kind of soil that shows cracks when it dries. It gets all cracky. That's really silty soil and it's really tight. That actually holds a lot of water, but it doesn't absorb water. So once it gets wet, it stays wet. It's slick like a button. You fall on your butt when you step on it. Your car gets stuck in 1/4 of an inch of it. It's really annoying, but it also holds a lot of water. So what the organic stuff does is in the sandy soil, it helps it hold water and nutrients in it. And in the silty clayey soil, it actually helps keep the soil loose. So instead of replacing silty soil with sandy soil, you add organics and you mix it together and it keeps it what we call friable and loose. And that's what allows the water and stuff to get into that soil. So it is sort of this magic wand, but you can't just go and dump 6 inches of this on your yard because you're going to have nothing left. So it's this ever-growing process of core aerating, punching holes in the ground, replacing those holes with this compost, adding 1/2 inch layers of compost on every year. And they do this on professional athletic fields. Baltimore, I think, had one of the best grass fields in the country. And they had this regiment of putting down compost. It's a regular science. So you got to make sure you get good compost, because if you get compost with weeds in it, well, you're just going to, be laying down weeds. So there's different kinds of compost. There's human, animal. Well, those are the two basic ones. And then the third common one too is like leaf litter. The really good stuff is the animal, and it's dried and pelletized or ground up into like a powder, and it gets put down. And it does smell. And if it smells good, well, for where I come from, remember, I have 1,000 acres of corn. Every time I go home, my wife is like, and it smells bad. Or we go to Yukon, I'm like, this is the smell of greatness. everything's growing good. If I could just have the what they call it, the honey wagon, the manure spreader. If I could just have that run across my yard once a year, we'd all have beautiful lawns. But there's a funny tangent. I do tangents. So everything in Western New York is dead flat. It's like Kansas. So all the houses are sort of built up on these hills so you can build a septic system in the front. And at the bottom of the septic system is the leach field, and that's where all the liquid goes, okay? Everybody's lawn is the best right there. It's not the best over there. It's not the best over there, but it is the best right there because it's constantly getting liquid nitrogen. So again, just on the soil, keep in mind that you can't grow grass on crummy soil. It doesn't matter what you do. Even chemical companies can only put so much nitrogen and so many chemicals down on that little thin layer. And when that happens, usually you'll notice if for some reason a treatment gets missed, it's like $1 million lawn, $1 million lawn, $1 million lawn, they miss a treatment, boom, the whole thing goes yellow, and it's like pulling the plug, you know. If you're taking vitamins every single day because you eat like garbage, you're mowing down Twixes and stuff, and then when you forget to take that Twix and you go straight to the ground, you lose all your energy. That's exactly what happens to the lawn. It's the exact same thing. It's losing all of its, you know, supplemental energy. So along with that, we have to worry about the sun and the shade. Nowadays, I sound like I'm old timer, but we didn't have the great varieties of grass back then that we do now, but there's a lot of seed mixes that you can get that pretty much will work in any sun or shade. But you should really, if you're really trying to make a really nice lawn and not chemicalize it up, you got to study the sun patterns in your lawn. So take the year and just suffer through it and just take a note every month basically of where the limits of the sun are hitting your property. I have a woods on the one side of my house, and then my house casts a shadow, the garage casts a shadow. The trees in the spring don't cast too much of a shadow, but in the summer they cast one. So if you just spend a year and every month sort of take note of how the sun is falling across your property, when you go to get the seed or have somebody seed your lawn, you'll actually be able to say, okay, I watched this for, you know, I know this part gets no sun this time of year. This part is in the blazing sun and it dies every summer. And over here, you know, it's 50-50 sun and shade. So that's important, and it goes into the different seed mixes that they will specify for you, or that you can do yourself if you want. So the grass itself, go ahead, Scott.
Does the winter matter? Like red shade is during the winter?
No, not typically. So Scott's asking, does the sun matter in the wintertime? For lawn, no, but again, a tangent. There are some plants that do not like the sun in the winter because the ground is frozen and the sun will evaporate all of the water out of the top parts of the plants, like rhododendrons, for example, and they will dehydrate and they will die because they can't get any water out of the ground because they store a lot of their evergreen moisture in those leaves. So you got to be careful about planting evergreens on the north side of your house, south side of the house, you plant them on the north side, whatever. So grass, no, doesn't matter. So the grass itself, bullet number one, see dirt. Check the dirt. Soil. Check the soil. Item number two, check the sun and the shade, right? And then I have some things on here that I said I was going to do because I had great aspirations and then I did not do them. And one of my items was common grasses that were found in New England. You can Google these if you like the Google and the internets, but I will just tell them to you slowly so you can write them down if you like. The most common one, which is also the worst one for a lot of reasons, is Kentucky bluegrass. Everybody wants Kentucky bluegrass. Everybody wants Kentucky bluegrass. Say that 10 times fast. The next ones are various varieties of fescues. I refer to them as either fine or tall fescues. So you have the bluegrass blends, and then you have fescue blends categorically, and then you have ryegrass, essentially. There's a annual rye and a perennial rye, but I'll just refer to it as ryegrass. All the other stuff is southern grasses like zoysia grass and all these Bermuda grasses. They're not for us. So those are the three big ones: K-blue, fescue, and ryegrass. So the first thing you can do is take Kentucky bluegrass and just wipe it right off of your list, unless you have irrigation at your house. If you are so lucky to have irrigation at your house, then you can have bluegrass. If you like to gamble, you can have a high bluegrass mix at your house and hope that the high intensity, short duration rainstorms magically change and we get back to 20 years ago where we have low intensity, long duration rain events. But that's not happening. So that's not a political statement, just we're trying to grow grass commercially, and I can tell you that we are changing the requirements for stormwater management because of these rain events, and they're short duration, high intensity. So what does that mean? Short duration. If you get an inch of rain in an hour and you have really crummy soil, 0.1, all of your water is not going into your ground, it's just going off somewhere. If you have really good soil and it has a lot of organics in it and it's highly permeable, which means water can go into it really quick, then these high intensity storms aren't so bad. But ideally, Kentucky bluegrass, back to the grass seed thing, it's called a cool season grass, and all three of them are, but it's the one that likes the coolest of cool seasons. So it likes long duration Ireland type of rain, just annoying, long, slow, painful, constant, miserable weather. And it will grow phenomenally. While we're on the topic of this, irrigation. So I do get into water in here in various places, but everybody thinks that irrigation is the cure-all. So most irrigation systems are, I'm going to just assume, are on city water. So city water is better than no water, but it's not the best water. And how you irrigate, also impacts how your lawn grows. So we know that, well, I know, and I'm sharing it with you, that grass likes these long durations, low volume events, which means that plants generally like to be soaked with water. They don't like to be inundated and then have it all run away. So grass is the same way. So most of the irrigation systems that I see, and unfortunately there's a lot of reasons for this, but the irrigation system will come on at like 6 a.m. It'll do all these different spots on the yard for about 15 minutes maybe, and then it'll run every day and it'll do that. But the whole rest of the day is just baking in the sun. So the irrigation system is kind of a crutch in that environment. What you really want the irrigation system to do is for it to run for like 2 to 3 hours and soak the entire thing down for an inch into the ground. We call this an inch of rain per week. Most plants want an inch of water per week, and they don't want it, in this little half-inch, quarter-inch thing in the morning. I talk about this Ireland situation. The difference between that and the irrigation system is it's raining all day long, right? So when you get these historical rain events where it would pretty much rain for 2 or 3 days, and then you would get an inch of rain over 3 days. When you do the irrigation system, you're putting a half an inch of rain down in the morning, and that's it. That's not the same as putting a really slow event over the top of it for the 3-day period. So it's important to understand there's a substantial difference between those two types of rain events, okay? So your irrigation system ideally has a soil moisture meter on it and a rain gauge, and you really want it to try and soak the lawn once a week and be done with it, if you can do it. If you can do it on well water, more power to you, because it doesn't have the same chemical composition as city water does. Yes, you can treat the water and you can do stuff to help make it better. There's also a lot of great ways now to store water, which is sort of a 16th 17th century thing where you put it in a big bin on the side of your house underneath the ground, and then you can, like a cistern, and you can pump that back out. So I try to store rainwater at my house. I use stupid 5-gallon buckets for my plants. So all of my hanging plants, I use a bucket. I have no gutters. So all the water just pours into my buckets, and I use those to water all of my hanging plants. And you will notice a substantial difference between watering your plants with roof water versus watering your plants with city water. And that is nothing against city water. It's just, it is what it is. So there's that. Back to the grasses. I mentioned the common grasses. There is also a National Turf Evaluation Program. It's called the NTEP. It's on this handout, but I didn't put the website. You can just, again, use the internet and look up NTEP. And what it'll do is it's a very technical website, but the gist of it is they have all these plots of grass in various regions throughout the country. And the really good seed suppliers will plant in these plots their seed mixes, and then they get evaluated against each other. Very few people know about this unless you're in the industry. And if you know about it, you can ask people who are supplying you with seed to require their seed mix to be performing in the top 10 of that turf evaluation program. So now I've just made a whole bunch of landscape companies very angry. But the really good ones do that anyways. One of the seed companies I was actually looking at today for my own lawn is a company called, and I'm going to forget it, United Seed, I believe it's called. And there's another company that provides all Lesco seed, which is, I'll remember it later, but the United Seed is a really good one. There's also a company, Valley Green, in our region that supplies seeds. So there's a few places, and I'll come back and I'll post these on our Facebook page or something when I remember all the names. I apologize for that. I did just find the United Seeds one today, for what it's worth. I was doing some research. So we're constantly adapting in our profession. We have to do continuing education, so I'm constantly using the internet like anybody else, going to seminars and things, and we learn things. So it's a never-ending process for us as well. So there's the turf evaluation program, which is really good information for you to use when you're trying to get seed. There's a large difference, and this is not to disparage Home Depot or Lowe's or any big box store. They have, they're trying to provide something to a group of people, and I'm not going to say that it's pretty bad. It just is. They do have some good seed mixes, though. If you look at Pennington, some of their Pennington seed mixes and some of the Scott's has bought a lot of the independent seed suppliers. So Pennington and Scott's, I think, are the two big ones at Home Depot. I don't know Lowe's, but if you go to those places and you, instead of just buying what you see and what's labeled on there, flip it around, look at the backside, and it'll list all of the seeds that are being used in there. Just a couple things to look for. Number one, you want on the foreign seeds, you want 0%. And I can almost assure you, you will not get it there. You want it to be as close to 100% of the seeds as possible that are on the list. So it'll categorize things by the seed percentage based on like Kentucky Blue, Fine Fescue, Liberator, all these varieties. And then there'll be like the inorganic or the other stuff like dirt and stuff that you can't do anything about. And then there will be weed seeds, essentially. And there's always, well, not always, in those places there's a percentage in there. But if you go to some of the wholesalers and their source providers, you can get it with 0.00%. So I said that I would do a matrix on grasses to use for your property, but I basically summed it up for you already. It's fine fescue and perennial ryegrass. The perennial ryegrass, most people don't really like because it's a rather large blade, and it doesn't really fit in well with the fescues because they're like, fescues kind of like your hair, and the perennial ryegrass is more like an ornamental grass. I mean, that's way exaggerated, but they're two, you can tell the difference of them, and they don't always mix well together. So I would recommend fescues if you're going to plant. It's more drought tolerant. it's more tolerant to traffic. So walking and driving on it, it's more tolerant to compacted soils. It's basically just a better type of grass all around. So fescues, I should sell fescues the way I talk about it. Putting seed down, straw versus hydro seed. All the old schoolers like me are straw people, and we would go out there and put the topsoil down, do all of our amendments, and then we would rake it in, and then we would put straw down. I actually had EA Quinn, props to EA Quinn. I asked them to straw my lawn that I had a whole bunch of pine trees taken down, and I asked them to straw it, and they were so excited because they don't get to use they have this piece of equipment that they actually use for one of our jobs, but they come out with this truck, and it's got a big straw bale shredder on it, and it's got a huge, the inverse of the leaf collector is this, and it blows the straw out, and it's so fun to watch. It's a little tricky to do straw though, because if you put it down too thick, it stays there quite a while. I still have some straw in some spots because I wasn't picky about it, but my grass came in beautiful with the straw. Straw holds water really well, which is good and bad. If you're not careful, you can overwater and kill it because of fungus and whatever else. But so there's two primary ways of doing that. If you're not doing sort of a top dressing seed where you're spreading it on the dirt that way, there's another way, which is really the best way. It's called vertical slice seeding. And what happens is it's like a piece of agriculture equipment, and it's got a disc sort of in the front of it, and it actually cuts the lawn or the dirt, and then it drops the seed down into the soil. Even when you're overseeding, I was talking to Ed from EA Quinn today about this, and even when you're using a slit seeder and you're doing overseeding, which means you're coming back when you already have grass and you're trying to put seed down anyways, it's really tough even for the overseeder to get it into that, so it's not 100% guaranteed, but it is the most expensive way to do seeding, but it is also the most successful way to do seeding. And usually they do that in at least two patterns, so you don't end up with cornrows. You go one direction and another direction. We're kind of jerks in our landscape architecture industry, sorry. And we make them do at least two, sometimes four in different directions. So, but again, we're sort of on this spectrum way over here. We're talking about the middle group. So, how do you get it started?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
With hydro seeding, since you like the straw,
Right. So hydro seeding mixes all the stuff together. It's got I didn't explain it. Thank you, Dorian. It's got the mulch in it. It's got fertilizer in it. It's got a tacking powder of a certain kind, and they're all a little different. And it also has the seed in it, and it's really fast to do. And it goes into a big tank, and they spray this green solution out on top of the topsoil, and it does work extremely well. Straw versus hydro seed, whatever. You can do it either way. But the hydro seed is the most common, and it's the most cost-effective way to do it. It's the most typical. The vertical slice seeding is the best. The straw way, I know I'm just an old school guy, and I like to do things the old-fashioned way. I have a 1950s mower if I could have one, but the hydro seeding has essentially replaced the straw method, if you want a simple answer on that. So the grass, we covered the grass. How about getting the grass started? So this is a little tricky part of the whole process. Number one, you need water, and you need water pretty much on demand. And you need to be monitoring your topsoil, specifically the top quarter inch. So the seed just sort of sits in this very narrow, thin film of topsoil, and then either with the hydro seed on top of it or with the straw on top of it, either way, it's sitting on a very fragile, highly susceptible to wind, drought, sun. You can lose it in 2 hours, maybe 4 hours, being conservative, literally. So you put the topsoil down, the topsoil needs to be moist, and then you need to have some kind of irrigation system out there, some kind of temporary watering. If the seed germinates and you get that green fuzz, everybody's like, oh, I got the green fuzz, we're in good shape. And then the sun beats on it and you get 85-degree weather or direct sunlight on it, and the topsoil goes from that moist looking damp to that dry cornfield dust, you're done. You're basically reseeding. So number one thing about getting grass growing is obviously the soil, which we talked about that, the water, but you gotta have water and you gotta have it ready to go and somebody's gotta be there to turn it on. So that's why we do it when, somebody's home, typically, or you pay somebody to make sure that, it stays wet. The concept with the straw and with the hydro seeding is that it sort of delays that dehydration of the topsoil and it keeps it damper longer so that you're not, going back and forth from watching the lawn and how much sun and all that. It allows it to go for more hours, essentially. But again, the same situation. If the hydro seed or the straw dries out, you're pretty much going to be reseeding and you lost your seed. And you can usually tell because it'll go from that green haze and then everything will just sort of turn that slightest yellowish and they'll all fall over. And then the next day, nothing is there. And it's very disappointing. So I mentioned water. Did I mention water? We talked about water, right? Water is important. I'm not going to really get into the chemicals that are needed for NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and what's the other one, Bob? Potassium. Thanks. So you should, I didn't mention this earlier on, and I should have, you can take a cup of soil, go to the UConn website, the extension website, put your soil into a container and send it off to them, and they will analyze it for you for $15 a sample, and they will send it back to you, and they will tell you what the nutrient analysis is. When you do that, if you're going to go through that much of that work to do that, pay the extra $15 and have them do an organic content test, okay? It's a separate test. So the reason I didn't talk about this early on is because my whole thing is about not adding fertilizer to fix your broken soil, right? My concept is that I'm trying to present here is instead of having the fertilizer put on it, which works, there's nothing wrong with it, or putting the lime's a little different. If you have bad pH, you can get a pH tester pretty much anywhere at any ag store. And you can get a pH tester and you can test the pH yourself. And there's not, lime and fertilizer are sort of, miles apart on the good, bad side. The limestone is naturally harvested from the ground as a mineral, although it's not fantastic. It's still better than how fertilizers are made. So I'm trying to encourage you to, instead of using bagged fertilizer, to get composted product, which will do the same thing, just takes a little longer. So instead of getting a bag of 10-10-10 fertilizer or whatever, 10-30, if you're going to really juice it up, right? 10-30 or the 30-00, the starter fertilizer. Yes, sir. That's the good stuff. That's party time for your lawn. You might as well call the truck up and have them come over with the liquid and dump that on there. So you're not going to do that with organics. You can get it with that kind of organic content in it, but when you get your organics in your soil up to around 6-7%, I didn't mention the percentage, anything above 5 is good. You can have too much organics technically, but it's really expensive and hard to do. So you want your organic content to be at least 5%. You lose about 2% a year naturally. Every time it rains, the organics break down, earthworms and all the insects that nobody wants in their lawn. Yeah, all that stuff breaks down the organics and makes it available to your soil. So that's why I didn't really talk about the soil sampling. It's useful if you want to figure out how long you're going to need to do this sort of organic approach to fixing your lawn. If you've got, the report comes back and it shows a bar graph, okay, and it'll be like bad and good, essentially, and that's pretty much what UConn says, or ideal, something like that. And most of the topsoil, even when we get it, is barely in the good spot, and almost all of the time we're requiring even contractors to come back and add organics to get the organic content up higher. So you're probably going to have like 2% organic in your lawn. You're going to have, if you're pumping it with chemicals, it's probably going to have super high nitrogen, and then it'll be probably low on the other two chemicals because the lawn's not super sensitive to those two, but it loves its nitrogen. So that was a roundabout way of talking about getting it started and keeping it going. But I'm trying to encourage you to, be patient with it, use organics, compost, and make your soil better. Yeah.
What are your feelings on some people in the fall will take their lawnmowers or whatever and run over, some of their leaves to grab them up and leave them on the lawn? Is that
So leaves,
sensible practice? I mean, I know it can also change depending on the acidity of the leaves. It can change
yes.
the soil.
So she's asking about composting your leaves for your lawn. If you leave uncomposted leaves on your lawn, it kills your lawn because it acts as like a mat over the top of it. If you grind them all up and you get them really small, they are really acidic. And you'll also have to add lime. And the lime actually helps break down. If you have a big pile of leaves and you dump lime on it, just a big pile of lime, it'll actually destroy the leaves almost not instantly, but really quickly. So if you use leaves and lime together, yes, but there's better uses for leaves than your lawn, I would say. Landscape beds, probably, especially rhododendrons and azaleas, they would love that, but not your lawn. You're looking for manure, basically, for your lawn. So think of a farm, like whoever's growing corn, when they're out there and they're dumping the manure down on there, that stuff is loaded with nitrogen because of where it comes from. And that's the same thing that you're trying to do to your lawn is get it. Yeah. Gary.
Calcium, like Magical, Jonathan Green, Magical. Calcium instead of lime.
Yeah. Yep. Calcium and lime. Yeah.
Same.
Yes. Has the same effect. Lowers the pH. The lawn pH, not all varieties are the same. So you have to look at your seed. I mean, I don't ever measure mine, but I can tell because I've been doing it for so long, looking at it, that if it's really light and lime greeny, it's probably pretty acidic. If it's really dark and like olive green and on the darker shades of green, it's probably in the good range. If it won't grow and everything else is right, you don't have a lot of compaction, and you think there's good organics or it's got a lot of nitrogen. If it still won't grow, then the pH probably isn't right on it. Like I said, you can get a tester from any of the places around here. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So how'd the grass do under your pine trees? You had your pine trees taken down. It's a very acidic soil. It's pine.
So I had 600 or 720-foot pine trees taken down at my house at a high cost. Very good company though. We brought in all new topsoil on top of that. 30 yards of it.
Depending on what kind of trees you have, either oak trees or some sort of fruit trees, that's an issue also. Because they're very acidic.
Very acidic. Norway maples, the ones that have the reddish purple crimson, they're called crimson maples. There's also Norway maples that don't have any purple reddish color to them. They actually put out a chemical in their roots that does not allow anything to grow underneath those trees. They're also invasive, so don't feel bad about cutting those down. A lot of people don't know that, but people will complain, I have this maple tree and I have planted lawn under that every year for 20 years and it will not grow. I'm like, it's doing what it's supposed to do. The tree is. So yeah, that's kind of brutal. Mowing. I'm going long here, sorry. Mowing. Everybody wants short lawn, right? The lawn grass is annoying. It has a lot of bugs in it. It stays wet longer. You can't play ball on it really. It's just not good for anything and everybody gets annoyed. So it gets cut shorter and shorter and shorter. So lawn typically should be mowed about 3.5 inches. 3.5 to 4 inches, which is going to be the top setting on your mower deck if it'll go that high. And most of the professional companies that do mowing mow it at that height anyways, unless you specifically ask them to do it at less than that. But they're probably mowing it around 3. Why? Well, it's come back next week right now. That's the funny part on here is mow it more frequently is one of my items right on the list. Higher setting, more frequent. The taller the grass is, the more shade it provides to the soil, and the less likely you are to get weeds to grow. So in order to get weeds, I'll call them weeds because we all want this monoculture thing, right? You need light, water, and soil contact. So if you are able to shade the entire ground with your 3.5 to 4 inch lawn, that's how I cheat at my house. You'll get a lot less weeds. And then also if you have somebody doing it or you have a mower that has rollers on the back, Simplicities have them, it stripes beautifully when the grass is long like that. So you get that great baseball diamond look, who your favorite team is. So that's one of the reasons I do it. Well, 1, to cheat because I don't have a great lawn. 2, because you water less. Actually, when you have longer grass, you use less water because it's not constantly trying to run away. And it provides shade, keeps the weeds down, and it keeps the ground cooler. So it's actually cooler in your yard if the grass is taller. It also does more evapotranspiration, I think, and it transfers more water or keeps more water, however that works. I should know that, but I wasn't planning on talking about that. Keep the deck blades sharp. The best type of mowers are the reel mowers, which work like scissors, and they have a spinner on them and a chopping blade at the bottom, and they act like scissors, and it actually shears the lawn off. But all the rest of us here probably have rotary mowers, which is some blades that spin underneath the deck in a circular motion. And the tremendous difference between the two, other than the cutting motion, the reel mowers, which you see on golf courses a lot, they're really expensive. But the old-fashioned ones, you ever seen the old-fashioned ones with, you just pushed it? Believe it or not, that will cut your lawn beautiful, and you will not get torn tips on the blades of the grass. So what rotary mowers actually do is they create a vacuum in the deck, and it sucks the grass up, and then just like getting your hair cut, kind of, if you had a vacuum cleaner up there, and then they cut it, it gets cut. But it doesn't get cut with scissors, it would be getting cut with a spinning blade. So all your hair would get torn instead of actually sheared, okay? So what you're really doing is you're just tearing all of the blades of the grass off, and then you'll get this weird looking yellow haze across the top of the grass. All the rest of it looks perfectly fine, and you get this like 1/16 of an inch, 1/8 inch. If you actually take a piece of blade of grass and you get a magnifying glass and you look at it, it'll be all rigid and torn. Whereas the reel mowers, it'll be a clean shear cut, and then it heals itself. So it doesn't die back. So what's actually happening on a rotary mower is the grass is actually dying back to a certain point, and then it leaves that yellow haze on the top. You can prevent that by keeping your blade sharp. Pardon me for a minute. Keep the blade sharp. I'm not going to tell you how to do that. Talk to somebody. I do it myself. A lot of people can do it yourself if you're handy, but keep the blade sharp. Another benefit of keeping the deck high is you hit less rocks and stumps, less blade sharpening. What else? Right. Mow in different directions. Well, first, don't collect your clippings. If you mow every week, every 2 weeks, you should not have to collect your clippings. You're basically collecting 2% fertilizer and putting it in the woods or in a compost or something. If you're composting it, that's one thing. But you're just taking free nitrogen off of your lawn, putting it in a bin somewhere else. And you don't even need mulching blades really to do it. If the grass is 3.5 to 4 inches tall and you're only cutting 1/4 to 1/2 an inch off, you're not even going to see the grass. If you go on vacation and you come home and you're mowing off half of the grass, well, then you might, in my day, we raked it, but now you can collect it. So the other thing about that, since I'm talking about it, is never take more than 2/3 of the grass off at a time. I recommend half. So if it's 4 inches long, don't do more than 3. But for today's purposes, don't take more than 2. So go out there and just pull it up. And it happens all the time. I go on vacation, you come home and you're like, oh my God, if my lawn was great, it would be super long. So keep the deck clean. You can, most of the time, you can just take a hose, high pressure hose or a power washer, spray everything out from under there because it impacts the amount of vacuum that the deck can create, which impacts how able the thing is to pull the grass up to shear it off clean. And the discharge chute, it seems like simple stuff, but a lot of people don't know it. Keep the clippings on the lawn and mow in different directions. So that whole compaction thing I was talking about, if you keep mowing in the same spots because you like the striping that way, guilty, you will end up with compaction literally in those, because you end up driving in the same spot over and over and over again. And the grass also sort of lays down when you go in that direction because the whole vacuum concept isn't perfect. So it'll just keep cutting the grass in a certain way. So if you go, you should go one direction and then 90 degrees to it the next time. And then just keep alternating. I'll go one way, the other way, and then 45 and 45, which you can ask, if somebody's mowing your lawn, you can ask them to do that too. Make sure that they're doing that.
And they're not always turning around in the same spot.
Yeah,
again, so you don't-
turn it around in the same spot when it's wet, it gets all rutted up. I know that the mower manufacturers don't tell you this, but if you set your tire pressure on your rear wheels, it's specifically the rear wheels of the mower, specifically riding ones, as low as you can get it without it breaking, there's a bead that goes around the rim and the tire. And about 5 to 7 PSI is the range that you can get the tires down to before it'll sort of slip on the tire. Mine are so low when I sit on it, the tire sort of squats, which is great. Get good traction, but it also widens the tire patch out and it keeps the compression and the compaction down on your lawn. It's also a much comfier ride for what it's worth. So that's a little trick that I do, but you should adjust the deck. If you have it set up a certain way and you're really pretentious about how you have that set up and super careful about it, set on the deck and then have somebody, measure the distance from the blade to the ground and recalculate it, because you can adjust the decks if you're doing it yourself. The mower guys, they know what they're doing, so you don't have to worry about that. Last on my list is chemicals. Again, the gist of today is if you do enough of the other stuff, you should be able to reduce the amount of chemicals that you need on your lawn. I use a little bit in the spring. I put down organic, which is like a 10-10-10 most, or a 5-5-5. But there's some products called Milorganite and chicken coop poop or something like that. I forget the specific name of it, but it comes in a yellow bag and it smells really ripe. It's wicked good. That stuff works really good. But again, we're not trying to be on a liquid diet here. We're trying to be on a more natural, sustainable way of doing things. It's pretty much it. I could go on for another day about this, but I think everybody's probably tired about hearing about lawns. Does anybody?